came tumbling down, and inquired the way to Norwich. He went by the south and burned his mouth with eating cold peas porridge. What? Have you never heard the story of the man in the moon? Then I must surely tell it, for it's very amusing and there is not a word of truth in it. The man in the moon was rather lonesome, and often he peeked over the edge of the moon and looked down upon the earth and envied all the people who lived together, for he thought it must be vastly more pleasant to have companions to talk to than to be shut up in a big planet all by himself, where he had to whistle to keep himself company. One day he looked down and saw an old man sailing up through the air towards him. This old man was being translated, and as he came near, the man in the moon called to him and said, "How is everything down the earth?" "Everything is lovely, and I wouldn't leave it if I wasn't obliged to." "What's a good place to visit down there?" "Oh, Norwich is a mighty fine place, and it's famous for its peas porridge." The elder man sailed out of sight and left the man in the moon to reflect on what he had said. The words of the older man made him more anxious than ever to visit the earth, and so he walked thoughtfully home and put a few lumps of ice in the stove to keep him warm, and sat down to think how he should manage the trip. You see, everything went by contraries in the moon, and when the man wished to keep warm, he knocked off a few chunks of ice and put them in his stove. And he cooled his drinking water by throwing red-hot coals of fire into the pitcher. Likewise, when he became chilly, he took off his hat and coat and even his shoes, and so he became warm. And in the hot days of summer, he put on his overcoat to cool off. All of which seems very queer to you, no doubt. But it wasn't at all queer to the man in the moon, for he was accustomed to it. Well, he sat by his ice-cold fire and thought about his journey to the earth. And finally, he decided the only way he could get there was to slide down a moonbeam. So he left the house and locked the door and put the key in his pocket, for he was uncertain how long he should be gone. And then he went to the edge of the moon and began to search for a good strong moonbeam. At last, he found one that seemed rather substantial and reached right down to a pleasant-looking spot on the earth. And so he swung himself over the edge of the moon and put both arms tight around the moonbeam and started to slide down. But he found it rather slippery, and in spite of all his efforts to hold on, he found himself going faster and faster, so that just before he reached the earth, he lost his hold and came tumbling down head over heels and fell plump into a river. The cool water nearly scalded him before he could swim out, but fortunately he was near the bank and he quickly scrambled on the land and sat down to catch his breath. By that time it was morning, and as the sun rose its hot rays cooled him off somewhat, so that he began looking about curiously at all the strange sights and wondering where on earth he was. By and by, a farmer came along the road by the river with a team of horses drawing a load of hay, and the horses looked so odd to the man in the moon that at first he was greatly frightened, never before having seen horses except from his home in the moon, from whence they looked a good deal smaller. But he plucked up courage and said to the farmer, "Can you tell me the way to Norwich, sir?" "I don't know exactly where it be, sir, but it's somewhere away the south." "Oh, thank you." The man in the moon... Oh, wait. I think I must not call him the man in the moon any longer, for he was now out of the moon. so I'll simply call him the man instead. Well, the man turned to the south and began walking briskly along the road, for he had made up his mind to do as the alderman had advised and travel to Norwich, that he might eat some of the famous peas porridge that was made there. And finally, after a long and tiresome journey, he reached the town and stopped at one of the first houses he came to, for by this time he was very hungry indeed. A good-looking woman answered his knock at the door, and he asked politely, "Is this the town of Norwich, madam?" "Surely this is the town of Norwich. I came here to see if I could get some peas porridge, for I hear you made the nicest peas porridge in the wilderness town." "That we do, sir, and if you'll step inside, I'll give you a bowl, for I have plenty in the house." "Will you have it hot or cold, sir?" "Oh, cold by all means, for I detest anything hot to eat." She soon brought him a bowl of cold peas porridge, and the man was so hungry that he took a big spoonful at once. But no sooner had he put it into his mouth than he uttered a great yell and began dancing frantically about the room, for of course the porridge that was cold to earth folk was hot to him, and a big spoonful of cold peas porridge had burned his mouth to a blister. "What's the matter?" "Matter? Where's the pie so hot? It's burning." "Fiddlesticks! The porridge is quite cold. Try it yourself." So the woman tried it and found it very cold and pleasant. But the man was so astonished to see her eat the porridge that had blistered his own mouth that he became frightened and ran out of the house and down the street as fast as he could go. The policeman on the first corner saw him running and promptly arrested him, and he was marched off to the magistrate for trial. "So, what is your name?" "I haven't any." Come, no nonsense. You must have a name. Who are you?" "Why, I'm Man in the Moon." "That's rubbish. You may be a man, but you're not in the moon. You're in Norwich." "But that's true, and of course you must be called something." "Well, if I'm not Man in the Moon, then I must be the man out of the moon, so call me that." "Very good. Now, where did you come from?" "The moon." "Oh, you did, And how did you get here?" "I slid down a moonbeam." "Indeed. What were you running from?" "A woman gave me a cold peas porridge and it burned my tongue." "This person is evidently crazy. Take him to the lunatic asylum and keep him there." This would surely have been the fate of the man had there not been present an old astronomer who had often looked at the moon through his telescope, and so had discovered that what was hot on earth was cold in the moon, and what was cold here was hot there. So he began to think the man had told the truth. Therefore, he begged the magistrate to wait a few minutes while he looked through his telescope to see if the man in the moon was there. So, as it was now night, he fetched his telescope and looked at the moon, and found there was no man at all. It seemed to be true that the man has out of the moon. "Let me see your mouth, sir, and see if it's really burned." Then the man opened his mouth, and everyone saw plainly it was burned to a blister. Thereupon the magistrate begged his pardon for doubting his word, and asked him what he would like to do next. "I'd like to get back to the moon, for I don't think I like the earth of yours. For the night it's too hot here." "Why? It's quite cool this evening." "I tell you what we can do. There's a big balloon in the town which belongs to the circus that came here last summer, and was bound for a board bill. We can inflate it and send the man out of the moon home in it.
That's a good idea.
So the balloon was brought and inflated, and the man got into the basket and gave the wheel to let go. And then the balloon mounted up into the sky in the direction of the moon. The good people of Norwich stood on the earth and tipped back their heads and watched the balloon go higher and higher until finally the man reached out and caught hold of the edge of the moon, and behold, the next minute he was the man in the moon again. After his adventure, he was well contented to stay at home, and I've no doubt if you look out through a telescope, you will see him there to this day.